All right, this is my now fourth interview that I've recorded, and every single time I have just been blown away by something that comes out of the interview that I didn't expect. My intent coming into this is to share my message with you guys, people who are trying to run your own businesses, don't have the feelings of success and happiness that you want, feel like business is a little bit of a struggle, and you just want more. You're ready to put that behind you, move forward, and this is what I'm trying to speak to in the show. So my intent for you is to come away with some piece of information that gives you hope, gives you an awakening, gives you a realization, something that's going to help you move forward towards building the business that you want. And I'm super excited about the guest that I have today. He came very highly recommended. I've listened to some of his content, and he was excited about the idea of being on the show. So that's a good indication too. Describes himself on his own website as an emotional core strength training coach, which I absolutely love. He's a personal empowerment coach and the founder of The Overwhelmed Brain, Paul Colaianni.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for that amazing intro. And I have to say, I love watching your setup. I don't know what part you actually edit and put into the show, but watching you go, okay. And you just get ready for it. So I was just like watching you go, wow, that's great.
All right, maybe I'll leave that in. That was just me setting my intent, taking a deep breath to reset before we get going.
I liked it.
So that I can really just be present with the content. And that's what I found to be really powerful. I used to hide in the anxiety, and now I just try and be honest and open and out there, and that's where I find the power lies. So what do we need to know about you, Paul?
It's funny, I use that term, emotional core strength training coach, because it's kind of an empowering thing where I focus on your emotional core. I don't really go for emotional intelligence, but it does seem like I teach a lot of that. But the emotional core, once you rebuild or rebuild that and strengthen it, everything from that point outwards happens in your life. And that includes business, romance, everything else like that. So I believe that all your success actually comes from within first and then moves without. So that's kind of where I like that you went with that, because I don't use that on my show. I don't really call that, but I really am that. So it's kind of a title I adopt, but don't really apply to myself all the time. But
yeah,
I think you caught it.
I love that, and one of the things that I say to people all the time is I more and more I'm coming to the belief that emotional health is the fundamental, foundational entrepreneurial skill. And it sounds very much like that. If we don't feel happy, if we don't feel successful, then it's going to be really hard to get those things in our business. And it sounds like that matches up pretty well with what you're saying.
I think it's a lot more than that, actually. I think what happens especially with entrepreneurs, because anyone in the online space, especially, I've met so many online entrepreneurs, and one of the biggest things that happens with them is some sort of fear kicks in. And so it's nice to think that, hey, if we were happier, if we felt better, then we could overcome that fear. But what I've learned, especially in the past few years, is that it isn't so much the fear that we need to overcome in what we're doing. It's the fear that we need to overcome in what we've done. So everything in our past has built these little fears inside of us. I mean, as children, we learned how to be fearful of different things. And then we take these childhood fears into our adult life and think they still apply. The context is so different. We're not in the home that we were fearful in or the situations that we were fearful in anymore. We're in situations in the adult world. So why are we taking these childhood fears into the adult world? And so that's why I was saying it's not so much of let's say some affirmations and feel better. It's so much more than that. And that's why I usually get to the emotional core and say, okay, what's going on in your emotional core that is holding you back in some way? Because as you know, it's probably like a lot of limiting beliefs that we bring in from childhood. So
yeah. So I think we are 100% on the same page. And this is going to be a really short podcast because we just agree on everything here, right? So that is absolutely what we want to dig into. First, tell me a little bit about where you are in your business today. Not necessarily the kind of coaching, but how the coaching is going for you. Your established business, you've got the podcast going. Just tell me a little bit about where you are professionally today.
Started my podcast in November, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, what it was going to expand into. but I wanted to create a foundation online of something. And one of the most tantalizing things was putting my voice on the air. I've always just wanted to be on radio. So this was the next best thing, and probably a better thing nowadays that everything is on demand and digital. So I did podcasting and still doing podcasting for this personal growth show I do. And the question was, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to take that into a professional point where I can create a sustainable income? And it's taken me about a year, since last November to this November, to actually figure out what I wanted to do, because I've been avoiding monetizing the show because the things I've addressed or the things I've looked at to monetize it just don't fit the show. And once you create or generate a following, either on a blog or a podcast, then you want to make sure that you continue bringing value without too many weird interruptions. Like if I threw in a cell phone commercial in the middle of a personal growth show, people might get a little, weird about that. So I decided not to go that route. And I don't actually charge for coaching at this time. So it's not my business model. I decided to focus solely on, for generating income, solely on doing affiliate stuff for my show. Like I'm starting with the Amazon link. I did the Audible. If you go to my website, you'll see the Audible link. So little things like that, but also where I think the bigger income is going to come from, or at least I should say monetization. I don't know about income, but monetization and passive income streams are ebooks. So I created my first ebook, and I have enough of a following now that I can promote my own published works to my audience, and that will build exponentially as I create more ebooks. So that's where my focus is right now.
Okay, so I take from all that the podcast and the coaching maybe isn't paying the bills right now. Is something else supporting that? Well,
when I started podcasting, one thing I knew I needed was a runway. I just knew it, because most people can't go into the world of podcasting and start making money right away. It's possible, but I knew that I wanted to build a runway so that I could figure out what I wanted to do with it. So the podcast itself and the income streams that I've already created aren't enough to sustain me as month-to-month bills. But that's why I built this runway. I worked my butt off before starting any of this stuff to save enough to live off of savings, and then just run after it until I was so tired I can't do it anymore, or I ran out of money. So I'm still in a good position, sure, and I'm still building that foundation, and I still have some runway to go. But now I'm getting really serious on income streams, so I'm thinking about these different avenues.
Sure. Okay. And so this is the process anybody starting a business would go through. You have your initial investment, and you do your work to build your base and your community and monetization and all that. What was the career that led into this?
Yeah, I've been in technology most of my life, so computers and IT. And it's funny because I equate computer technology with brain technology, because our brains are just this quantum mechanical computer that's very advanced, but we're very process driven as well. So I've loved processes. I've loved structured processes and technology all my life. So I've gotten into most technological fields. So even up to last year, like up till June or July, I was doing IT projects, building, replacing, working on computers and networks and things like that. So yeah, right up to that point, it's funny, this, if I can go off a quick side story, I was working for this hospital, and they told me they were going to hire me on full time. So I really had plans to work full time in technology in this hospital. And so I kept getting promises like, oh yeah, we want you, we're going to keep you, we love you, because I was as a subcontractor. And then I finally cornered one of the managers and said, you keep telling me you're going to keep me, but I'm still not hired on yet. What's going to happen to me? And he goes, well, just keep an eye on the job boards and we'll see what happens. I'm like, what? Keep an eye on the job board? You just gave me all these promises.
Right. That's not what I had in mind here.
My heart sank. I was just like, you know what? And that was the first time, like 2 days, I was kind of moping. That was the first time ever in my life I said, you know what I need? I need to be an entrepreneur. I need to take my own life by the horns and just control my own destiny. I said, I don't care if I have to work 16, 20 hours a day to make this happen, but I'm going to do it. And so that was the impetus. That was my boss just giving me the bad news so that I could take a step forward and do my own thing. So that's how I transitioned.
Yeah, we're on a very similar trajectory here. I came into this also from technology.
Oh, no.
I got my electronics repair training in the Marine Corps 20 years ago now, and have been largely self-employed since then, or working at very small companies. And for me, the evolution was I kept building companies, and every 3 to 5 years, I'd just get really frustrated and kind of sick of it, and it wasn't growing the way I wanted. I wasn't making the money that I want, so I'd scrap the whole thing and start over again. And so then now in my last company, which I actually just sold, which created the runway for me to do this podcast, I was getting to that same point 2 or 3 years ago and realized, okay, so here's now my fourth go around with this, and I'm about to walk away from another company. What do all these experiences have in common? Let's see. Oh, right, me. So maybe I need to fix that. And that really put me on the path towards this idea of emotional health and the impact on business, because I wasn't happy. I didn't feel calm. I was trying to protect myself from everybody, and you can't build a business that way.
Right.
So that's the more I learn about you, the more I realize we're on the same trajectory here. I love it.
It does take bold steps. I mean, especially if, like, I was a 9-to-5er all my life, not an entrepreneur guy at all. I think we're all entrepreneurs to some extent, though.
Oh.
We're all selling ourselves in some way to someone else. So I just, when you get out of the 9-to-5 mold or the corporate mold, you expand upon that. And then you realize, wow, I got to wear so many more hats. There's a lot more involved, especially if you want to make a sustainable income. But I've noticed that it's funny that you say 2 to 3 years and then you're either burnt out or need to sell or do something else. It does seem like the entrepreneur's path is like a 2 to 4 year cycle of anything they do, especially if it's not entrepreneur. From what I've seen, or at least my own experience, I've gotten burnt out at anything I've done in about 4 years. It's like, what is this 4-year cycle thing going on? So just the fact that I've been doing this about 1.5 years now, and I know I'm just going to continue going strong with it, and I've built such a large base of listeners or an audience, and my web traffic's getting more and more and more. It tells me that I'm going in the right direction. Everything just seems to line up. I don't know if there's some spiritual thing out there, but when you're doing the right thing, resources come into play and align for you to make it work better, which is why I agree that you should always take a bold step into something, maybe with a backup plan, but a bold step knowing that, you know what, this is do or die. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this work no matter what. And
even if you're going to walk away every 3 to 4 years,
right,
it's much better to walk away on a high note with a good exit than out of frustration and anxiety and I don't know what I'm going to do next. So
yes, I agree with that.
Much better situation this way. And even if the only thing that's different is how you feel about it, that's still a pretty big deal.
It's huge. I mean, like you said in the beginning, our emotions kind of pave the way to what we're going to do next. And fear can definitely hold us back. But I always like to break down the process of fear, because every emotion actually has a process behind it. It's like, how did you get to fear? Okay, well, I got to fear. Oh, I'm afraid to take this step because I have a family. I might go homeless. I might not be able to pay my bills. There's all kinds of fears that come up. Or I'm afraid of being in the public eye. They might judge me. They might do this. They might do that. But let's take a step further into that and go, okay, what's causing that? What's causing that fear of being in the public eye? Well, if I'm in the public eye, they might judge me. Well, why is it so bad to get judged? And a lot of people don't get beyond that step. They think, well, I just don't want to be judged. Well, how is that a bad thing? And so that's what my show does, is that we dig into how those things are bad or not, and they may not be bad at all. They may be something else. And sometimes they point to other fears that have nothing to do with being judged, but, my mom never loved me when I was a child, or I got whipped by my dad, or something even worse. So there's a lot of deeper level things that stop us from doing things today because we have something in residue from the past.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, and if you're the process guy, maybe there's an answer to this. Is we're kind of blind to that within ourselves. And I heard a coach say the other day that you can't see the picture if you're the frame. But I talked to so many business owners at networking events who will say, I'm not getting the results that I want in my business. I don't have the revenue. I'm not getting the clients. I'm not connecting with people in sales and marketing on one hand. And then on the other hand, they'll say, yeah, sure, I struggle with anxiety and depression and fear and all these things. And then they just stop and don't look at, could there be a connection there, a relationship? Is that, what creates that disconnect? Do you have any insight there?
Yeah, it's funny because that's why I love the niche of your show. That's why I love the topic that you talk about, because what holds us back isn't the surface level stuff that we deal with every day. Mm-hmm. What holds us back is what's inside of us. And God, what's the first thing that you think about when you wake up in the morning? Are you full? Like I used to wake up with anxiety every morning. I used to have nightmares every night for 2 years. And this is something I learned and I'll tell the nightmare story. My nightmare story is when I would wake up with anxiety from nightmares for 2 years. Anxiety stems from all the repressed negative emotions that you have throughout the years, because you don't want to maybe honor your personal boundaries or speak up when you want to express something inside of you. So all this stuff built up inside of me, and I started having nightmares because I wasn't expressing my negative emotions. They had to go somewhere, so they became subconscious dreams at night. So I was getting sick of it. These nightmares I've had for 2 years. I finally woke up one morning full of anxiety, as I usually do, and I said, you know what? I'm sick of this. Because when you have something bad happening in your life, you're resisting it. You don't want any more of it. You don't want any more anxiety. You don't want any more fear. You just want to resist it. And I figured out that resistance actually increases the anxiety, and resistance increases the fear. So I said, what if I decided to choose to have the worst nightmare I could possibly have and just face my fear head on? And so I made that commitment to myself. I said, tonight, I'm going to have the worst nightmare ever. I want to make sure that I'm getting chased by aliens. I don't know what, getting slaughtered by a serial killer or whatever. Just make it so bad that I wake up in a sweat with my adrenaline pumping. So I went to bed that night and I woke up the next morning and I didn't have a nightmare. And I was like, okay, coincidence. Years later, hadn't had a nightmare since. So the fact that I chose not to resist anymore and just, this is another going towards taking a bold step. I took a bold step forward into that. It's like taking a step into fear because it busts your resistance. Once I busted that resistance out, that fear went away. So I think what holds a lot of us back is our resistance to what could happen. That's what creates anxiety anyway. If we go through that and just go, you know what? I love this saying. I always use it. Bring it on. Bring it on. Bring me the worst you got. Make me homeless. I don't care. Take away all my money. I don't care. It's not going to happen in that sense because you're going to step through it and face the worst case scenario. Once you step through that resistance and face the worst case scenario, you suddenly have more opportunity than you've ever had because you opened yourself up to it. When we resist, we close ourselves off to opportunity because we're only limited by our own thoughts and processes.
Yeah, what you I don't know if you said it exactly this way, but to the idea of what you resist persists.
Yes.
I think this. That's how strength training works. You strengthen the muscles that you use, and if you practice being fearful or anxious or whatever all the time, that's what you're going to get really good at. That's what you teach yourself to do. And I think this idea of stepping into fear really gets to the core of what I want to talk about on this interview. But I have one more question that I want to ask about your background, because one of the you share a story on your about page of your website for the Overall Mind podcast about long-term relationship ending and depression resulting from that. Did you see any parallels there with your professional life?
Parallels. Well, I had a 13-year relationship, and there probably are a lot of parallels that I haven't considered yet. When I think about it now, I depended on other people to be happy. In my 13-year relationship, I depended on that girl in my life to bring me happiness, to bring me all the stuff that I thought I needed. So it was a dependent relationship. When you develop dependencies on anything, or attachments, when you develop attachments on anything, you add more restrictions in your life. You add more things that you don't want to let go of. The more you don't want to let go of, the harder your life gets. And so yes, when I take my 13-year relationship that I did not want to let go of, she broke it off with me, and I held on to it. And I held on to it so tightly because I thought that's where my happiness comes from. I became depressed because I wasn't getting that happiness anymore, because I hadn't found it intrinsically inside of me, which it was, but I just couldn't connect the dots back then. So yes, I put myself in a job situation, and I remember being in so many jobs where I better not speak up because my boss might fire me. Right. And so here I am attached to this job, not taking chances, not stepping up, not saying things to value me, not saying things to honor me. And that's one of the things I teach is if you honor your personal boundaries at the risk of losing your job, losing your girlfriend or boyfriend, losing things in your life, the less you become attached to, the more you can value yourself and honor yourself. So that's what I found, is that I started honoring myself at work, and the weirdest things started happening. The best, weirdest things started happening. I remember speaking up to my boss. You know, I wasn't angry and yelling at him, but I said, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. And it was the first time I actually stood up for myself, and I was scared. I got through it, but I got respect. It was like, wow, they stopped. I had two bosses. They both stopped and looked at me, and they said, you know, that's what we need to hear. I was like, really? Wow. And ever since then, I got more and more, I strengthened it. I worked it out. I worked that muscle, that personal boundary muscle. Yeah. Strengthen. And soon people were admiring me and coming to me, and they wanted to know my opinion. I wasn't this fearful person worried about losing my job anymore. I stepped into it and said, I don't care if I lose my job. This is what I think is right. And wow, that just changed my life. So yeah, I see the parallels.
I had the exact same experience in my tech business when I was worried about it growing, and it wasn't growing the way I wanted, and I wasn't making the money, and I wasn't connecting with people. And once I finally started to realize even, that I didn't have to protect myself from everybody. And I could engage openly, and what people wanted was that personal connection. Then all of a sudden, sales started closing and money started showing up, and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. So I totally get that. On the website, you talk about how that experience kind of started you, I think, on the path to personal development. Earlier in this conversation, you mentioned that a lot of times our fear comes from things in the past. Do you have anything that you can share about where that came from for you? Did you have any realizations around that?
Oh yeah. One of the biggest breakthroughs I've had several in my life, is when I met, who's now my ex-wife, but when we met, a few weeks after we met, she was ready to leave me. And this was after the 13-year. I was still kind of depressed, and so it was kind of hard for her to deal with. And I was like, why do you want to leave me? And she was like, because I just can't handle your depression. And it was true. I mean, she was this happy, energetic girl, and she met me. It was kind of like, it's great to be with you, but, and so she didn't know I was depressed, and she was about to leave me, and something snapped in my brain. I was like, wow, I'm about to lose something really great here. This is real. This is something real. And then I asked myself, what is wrong with me? Why am I so upset? And then like 35 years of hatred towards my stepfather came out in tears. I just broke down. I got on my knees, and I had my head on her lap, and I was just crying. I was just like a blubbering idiot crying. And I actually yelled, I hate my stepfather. And the reason was because, you know, I grew up, and he was an alcoholic, and he still is. All my life, he's been an alcoholic. Get drunk to pass out almost every day. But, you know, as a child, I'm learning these coping and survival mechanisms so that he doesn't get evoked. And I started figuring out all this stuff that the way I was behaving today, you know, I was super responsible, super perfectionist. I was a yes person. I would say yes to everything because I didn't want confrontation. I wanted to make sure everyone was happy. I was a pleaser. So many of these issues that I figured out, wow, that's who I was, and that's how it was created when I was a child, because I didn't want to evoke drunk dad behavior. So I remember cowering my room, hoping he didn't kick open the door, and it's very scary. And when you're a child, you develop these survival mechanisms, and then if you don't heal from those, that's who you become, and it evolves in not always a good way into your personal, professional, adult life. So that's my revelation in my mind. Is when I came through these breakthroughs, I had to look back to my childhood and go, origination, the fears or anger or sadness that I feel today, how does that resemble what I went through yesterday or what I went through in my childhood? And that's when I put all the pieces together.
And that's such a powerful story, and goes exactly to the reason I want to have these conversations, because I think so many people have those kinds of experiences in their background. Alcohol abuse, divorce, sexual abuse, physical abuse, bullying.
Yes.
An overwhelming percentage of our population is affected by these things. And those people are out, trying to start businesses. And I focus specifically on business owners, because if you're unhappy in a job, unfortunately, if you can do well enough to collect your paycheck every week, then maybe nobody cares. But as a business owner, you can't get the results that you want and feel happy with it and feel fulfilled by it if you're fighting against all these things. And so many people, and for 35 years, I was one of those people, not putting that connection together, not understanding what it was that I was fighting against. And for the people listening to this interview, that's what I want you to hear, is not necessarily that it's the solution for you, or this is the same thing that you went through, but if you're struggling against something like this and you don't know what, be open to seeing that connection and looking for, the healing that you need. And just know that the answers are out there and you can find them. You just have to be willing to go into that. And so this perfectly sets up my core thing for the show, which is I generally run into a couple kinds of entrepreneurs. One is the guy who says, well, you charge what you're worth and you build your business and you make money. I don't even understand the question. Just go out there and do it. And then there's a group, and you'll hear this a lot from coaches, which is you have to make the hard, there is fear. There are hard choices. Everybody experiences fear. You just need to be willing to step into it. But for me, that a lot of times that in the past had fallen short. And what I realized is it has to do, I think, with the core idea of trust. If you trust yourself that you're going to be okay, that you can take care of yourself, and ultimately everything's going to work out, then you can step into fear, difficult situations. But one of the things that we can learn from these traumatic emotional events that go unhealed, especially as children, is that we can't trust ourselves because the people who we do trust let us down. Mm-hmm. So it can make it really difficult to step into fear if you don't have that underlying belief in yourself that everything's going to be okay. Do you see that? I mean, it sounds like to some extent that's kind of what you dealt with, came to that realization, had the healing, let go of the emotion, and moved through it. Do you see that same kind of dynamic with your clients? How does that strike you?
Well, I think the two scenarios that you painted are pretty accurate. And one thing that you mentioned was that the people we looked up to as children, they were our role models. They were how we learned how to live and work in the world. And we were also creating our own belief system, our own values, our own, our self-assessment at that time. Who am I? How am I valued as a child? And we take this, how am I valued as a child, into the adult world, into our corporations, our businesses, our entrepreneurial stuff. And that's when the fears develop. And some people were raised with, my dad worked hard and he just went for it, and that's what I do. And there's no fear. It's like, wow, where do you get this confidence? This is great. It's like you said, they just said, what do you mean? I never had to, that's always been, it's easy. And I've met entrepreneurs that just have no problem doing that. That's great. And then there's the rest of us. There's that we walk into a situation and then we're suddenly fearful for no reason, it seems. But I think one of the most important breakthroughs I've had was when my car broke down in Sedona, Arizona. It was actually Flagstaff, right outside of Sedona, Arizona. was about 1,000 miles from home, and I had like thousands of dollars worth of tools and audio equipment and just a lot of stuff in my car. I don't know why I had so much stuff in my car, but I traveled with a lot of stuff in my car at all times. And it broke down, and I had no money in my pocket, and I think I had a gas card to get home, but I can't do anything with a gas card except buy gas, so I didn't know what to do. And so that was the first time I actually started having what felt like a heart attack, but it was actually a panic attack. And I've never felt a panic attack before. So here I am at this service station that I pulled into, and my car is just on its last legs. And I'm dying inside. I feel like, oh my God, everything's getting worse. Everything's really terrible. How am I going to get my car and my stuff home? And my girlfriend at the time was like, just get on a bus and come home. And I'm like, yeah, but I got all my stuff here. I still have to get my stuff home. I was so concerned about my stuff. And tow truck driver comes along and pulls in. I was like, oh, this is it. This is the universe's message of saying, I'm here to help you. And I was thinking, okay, this guy's going to know how to fix my car. He's going to fix a wire in my car and everything will be great. So he comes over and I was telling him the problem. And I'm thinking, yes, this is it. This is the answer. I was a little spiritual. And I told him the problem and he goes, oh, that doesn't sound good. And I'm like, oh, no. And then he goes, no, that doesn't sound like good at all. And I was like, oh, great. So all this panic and fear and anxiety started to come back again. And I had a thought. I was like, what if I sold some of my stuff in my car? Then I can get enough to maybe, I don't know, get a flatbed to pull my car and my stuff home. And so I opened the trunk and his eyes got really wide. And I'm like, okay, he likes something in here. And I thought he was looking at the tools, but he was looking at these bass speakers I had in my trunk. And I was in my 30s. I must have liked loud music back then. And I said, you like those? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, I wonder, would you buy those? And he goes, how much? And then something came to my mind. I was like, you know what? Even if I sold these, I would have to sell it like a yard sale, like 10, 20, 30 bucks at a time, $100 at a time. I'd still never get through this day. I got to get home. And all this anxiety just popped. It was like the worst case scenario just happened. I realized that I was about to lose everything. This is it. This was the moment, that do or die moment. And the worst case scenario popped in my head, and I suddenly felt peace. This is why I'm like, go through your resistance, face your fear. Because once you jump into it, you're going to bust the threshold of your fear. You're going to bust the threshold of your anxiety and just push right through it. Because when that happened to me, this peace just washed over me. And I suddenly felt no attachment to anything. And when that happened, I asked him, would you take the car and everything inside it for $200? And I just came to a peace with that. And he goes, well, yeah, of course. And I'm like, great. All I need is a ride to the bus station so I can get home. And it was that moment, the letting go of attachments, that allowed me to face any fear. Because I truly believe that once you face and get through the worst case scenario, everything else is cake. Everything else is cake.
So there's two stories, letting go of the anger towards your stepfather and letting go of the attachment to these possessions. And my wife and I have a joke about how do you let go? It's so painful. How do you do it? And the answer is you just let go, right?
Yeah.
What maybe primed those for you? I mean, what if you could have just let go of it years ago, then you would have just done that. What helped you get to the point where you were able to do that?
It's funny. I don't know what to believe spiritually, so I stay open to everything. I'm very open, and I am somewhat of a spiritual person, but I just stay open to what's possible, because anything is possible in my mind. So before I broke down, like a few days before, I met a guy who just believed in God and just believed in so many magical, mystical things, and he was just always happy. I was like, wow, I want that feeling. I want that feeling of always being happy. And I said, how do I convince someone like myself to believe in something like that when I'm so practically minded? I never talked about this on the air, actually. I'm just so practically minded. I'm just so process oriented. I'm just analytical. I want to be like you. I want to feel this spiritual, happy feeling that you feel. And he goes, it was great. He said, you have to have a mystical experience. You can't just seek it. It has to happen to you. I was like, really? That doesn't help, but okay. And a few days later, that was it. That was my mystical experience. So in a sense, I asked for it. Now, that's my belief. I'm going to use it until it doesn't work anymore. And
Fair enough.
what primed me for that is, I don't think you can be primed for something that is so powerful that it changes everything. Because I never thought about letting go of attachments. I collect things. I used to have a box full of cables. I got a new cable, a new S video cable, a new audio cable. I just put all these cables in. And every tool I would used to collect. And I just collected so many things because just in case I needed it, and that was my biggest downfall, just in case I needed it, I'm going to save it. And so I collected more and more and more stuff. I wasn't a hoarder by any means, but I just collected a lot of stuff just to have it on hand because I loved resources, I loved tools. So to go from being someone who saves everything and collects everything to having no problem letting go of everything, I can't think of anything that primed that except my resistance about it. And I really think that what we resist in life is exactly what we need to experience in order to let it go.
So timing wise, how do these three, and we'll even add the nightmare thing into the mix. How does ending the nightmares, having this experience with the car, and then the divorce 3 years after the long-term relationship ended, time wise, were those things all kind of close together? Or are these spread out?
No, they were all spread out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got, let's see. A couple of them were close together. When I broke down with my car, it was right before I got married. But then I got married, and I was married for 4.5 years. And then I got divorced. No, a lot of this stuff was spread out. Yeah, okay. So I would go 5 or 10 years and then have a breakthrough. Then 5 or 10 years and have another breakthrough. I'm 44 now, so if that kind of gives you an idea of, I would have a breakthrough every 5 to 7 years maybe. But there's no...
Do you see them as a series or as just kind of individual events that happened when they needed to happen?
I think there was something intrinsic of me that didn't want to be who that person I was. And because that seed was in there, I stayed open to breakthroughs. There's a lot of people that don't do that. They just want to own their misery. They want to own their anger. They want to stay in this place, even though they say they don't. But they don't take any steps towards not being miserable. Like a big one is not being able to forgive someone. I didn't forgive my stepfather for 30-something years, and I didn't even know I was angry at him because you're not supposed to hate anyone, right? You're not supposed to hate people. But when that hatred came out, I realized, wow, I've been holding on to this hatred for all this time. No wonder I'm, feeling this way about this and feeling that way about that, because I have it inside of me. So like this non-forgiveness that I held on for so long, if I were to tie things together, yes, there's a lot of childhood beliefs, again, in the adult person that I am and was, that does tie things together in a sense. And a lot of it, and I teach this on my show as well, is the personal boundaries thing. As soon as I started honoring my personal boundaries and just speaking up when I felt like I needed to say something, my life started changing. And the more I did that, the more breakthroughs I had, which is why I start at the core. All right, your core, this is what you're protecting. It's like a bank vault. What's in there is your emotions, your highest vulnerability. Yeah. And once you're able to open that and expose your authentic self to the world, that's where your strength comes from. So a lot of people aren't in strength when they are in defensive, I gotta protect everything inside of there.
Right.
So your emotional core, where all your emotions are, where all your fears and your embarrassment, your shame and guilt, everything you're afraid to show the world is locked away, so is your strength. And once you expose that, and that's what ties everything together. That's what I'm saying, is that I think I've held that emotional core tightly closed for so long. I didn't want to show the real me. And that comes from not wanting to show the real me as a child, because if I show the real me, then drunk dad might get evoked and he might do something bad to me. So once I got beyond that, then I was able to see where the dots connected and go, oh, okay, I was a chameleon this whole time, and now I'm authentic And now I'm not having as many problems as I used to have. What's going on?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. And just towards the end reminded me of so many times I go to networking events with other business owners who do their 30-second commercial and talk about how great their business is and how everybody should want to do business with them and give me all your referrals and let's get together. Yet I was just talking to this guy before the meeting and he was telling me how he doesn't know he can pay his mortgage and he, hates his dog and his wife is giving him a hard time and all this stuff. Yet now you're not being true to yourself. You're not being authentic when you come into that business. So it really, I think, sets you up for that. I think this is a lot of times even where the imposter syndrome stuff comes from is that you feel like you have to be somebody that you're not to impress people in business. Yet deep inside that you're not happy and you're struggling and you don't know what to do about these things and you don't have the answers to take care of yourself. So how can you take care of somebody else? Yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah, that's so true. When I first started the podcast, it was like, I think I had one episode where I talked about this, where I wanted an intro that says, "Welcome to the overwhelmed brain," and I wanted to put my radio voice on and have this horn music and just be excited and motivational. And I played it for my girlfriend at the time, and she's like, "Oh my God, that's not you at all." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's not me? I'm motivated. I'm energized. That's me." She goes, "No, that's not you at all." And that helped bouncing this stuff and taking the honest feedback from other people, especially the closest people in my life. I was like, okay, what is me? And so I come up with what I have now, the more mellow intro, and because I'm a very kinesthetic, touchy-feely kind of guy. So
perfect for technology jobs.
Yeah, exactly, really. Exactly, it's true. So I went with that. I was like, okay, I'll just go with, I guess, who I am. I mean, all right, we'll see what happens. I'm gonna prove you wrong. And it turned out that's exactly what helped me succeed doing my podcast and creating the website. And it also reminds me of when I go on a job interview now. I mean, I don't do it now, but when I was going on job interviews, I learned to be more of myself, even if it made me look bad for the job. I stopped pretending to be the perfect candidate and just came in as me. And when I did that, it was wild. I noticed that they wanted to hire me even if I didn't have all the skills, even if other people had the skills, because I was the guy they wanted to work with. Not because I couldn't learn it, because I can. They knew I could learn it. But I was just an easygoing guy to be around. And I've noticed that the more I am personal with people in business and all my connections I make online, the better off my life is. I don't have to be someone else. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to, because that's what happens. You get burnt out. If you go into the job interview, if you do that, if you go into a job interview wearing a mask saying, "Oh yes, I'm qualified and I do this and I can do this for you," you have to be that person the whole time you're there. It wears you out. But if you go in being yourself, that's the same person you can be a year from then. It's this person you met. So
yeah, I think the equivalent in business, a lot of times business owners will say they have trouble charging what they're worth or they're not getting paid enough. And it's the exact same idea, I think, and goes both to the power of authenticity. And do you really know who you are? Do you believe in who you are? Do you value yourself? And also to the idea of that emotional core strength, that if we're holding on to anger, if we're holding on to anxiety, if we're holding on to fear, it blocks the emotion. And emotions are our most powerful tool that we have in any aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And business is all about the relationships. But if we learn not to trust our emotions, not to let ourselves feel that stuff, that's our intuition. That's our gut feeling that we're saying, "Oh, I don't trust you. I don't trust myself." So how are you going to go out there and build a business doing that? Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And a lot of people don't realize that decision is based on emotion. Every action and behavior you have in your life is based on an emotion, even if you don't feel that emotion, because otherwise you wouldn't make that decision. So decision is based on an initial emotion about something, which is probably based on an initial thought about something. You have a thought, you have an emotion about it, you take action. It happens so fast, and you're making quick split-second decisions. But some people got that wired. They're already comfortable with their decisions, and they're doing it. And if they say that I'm not making this decision because it makes me happy, it's untrue. We usually I think it's always. We always make decisions that we think would benefit us somehow. If it benefits us, it fulfills us in some way. It satisfies something inside of us for some way. Even decisions to hurt yourself. I mean, there are people that hurt themselves, they cut themselves. There's a benefit that they find in doing that. And that's feeling better somehow. And I certainly don't recommend that. Get help. No. But every decision, like you said, is based on an emotion, and some people don't realize that. So I absolutely agree. Once you build that emotional core, once you start honoring yourself and allowing the emotions to come up and just facing them and just let them come up. And people equate emotions with being more feminine, and that's weak, and it's not true at all, because the more authentic I am on my show, the more emotion that I let people know that I have, the more people connect with me. They go, wow, you're so authentic. I like that. It's just something about you. And the more rapport you build with people, because everyone experiences emotions, part of the human experience. So I agree with you.
Yeah, we're like you said, we're taught to kind of suppress emotion,
right?
And equate emotion with weakness. But emotion is so powerful. And I know for myself, I have never felt stronger than when I finally learned to express anger over true injustice. And the value of being able to use that, knowing that the alternative was just that I had been directing it back at myself the entire time and letting it turn into depression, anxiety, and fear, and all these other.
Did you become fearless?
I'm still working on it. We'll see.
Oh, okay.
give me a couple more weeks.
Okay, you got it. Oh, wow, that's quick.
Well, it's been a long process. Okay, gotcha. Ready for it to be over. Maybe a couple weeks is optimistic, but
okay.
And I'm sure it's never over. At any rate,
never over. Otherwise, you'd be dead. So
I know, and it's like talking through the stories and this core message of let go of this stuff. We coach what we need to learn, right?
Yes, absolutely. Everything I teach on my show is something that I've gone through myself.
Yeah.
And the hardest episodes I've done are stuff that I have not personally experienced. And it's so much harder to speak from something you haven't experienced. And I think that's what happens with people with the imposter syndrome, is that they go, well, it's like the financial guy or somebody saying you can make $100,000 a month. And, I haven't made $100,000 a month, but I can tell you how to make $100,000 a month. Right. And then they start feeling like, well, that could happen. I mean, that's probably not exactly the definition of the imposter syndrome, but that's what happens is that if, for me, I couldn't tell someone how to make $100,000 a month, even though I think I could, but I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that until I've actually done it myself.
Yeah, but I think this is where a lot of people run into trouble, is they undervalue the power of who you are. Because I know when I would start talking about the impact of emotional health on business, so many business owners would come up to me and say, man, I don't know what it is about what you just said, but that makes so much sense to me. Tell me more about that. I felt the same way. How does that work? And nobody ever responded that way about the technology stuff. Shockingly.
Right.
But that's where I really started connecting with people and feeling that power. And I think so many people underestimate the value of who they are in the equation. And it's the same. It doesn't even matter what industry it is, but in the expert space, you hear that all the time, that you may have the same message as somebody else, but they don't have you and your unique advantage.
Yep.
It's true for plumbers. It's true for architects. It's true in every career. You are the value that you bring to your business.
Yep.
And people, if you're fighting against that, it's going to be a tough fight. Probably not one that you can ever win.
No. And people do value when they get the authentic you as well. There's just something about it. They don't know what their subconscious mind is picking up. All the body language cues and the things that we can't consciously detect. But when you're talking with anyone, there's all these nonverbal signals happening that you're picking up. And the more authentic you are from the inside out, the more that comes out and people pick up on it. And I've had people come up to me just for a few seconds and just tell me their life story. People who don't know me just walk up to me in the hall, like in the hospital. I remember she just walked up to me and just told me her life story. And the people I'm with always they say, people just do that with you. Why do they do that with you? I don't know. And I really think it is because the more authentic you are to the world, the more people connect with that, the more they can trust you. There's that trust term again.
Absolutely.
You become more trustworthy the more authentic you are. So I say, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, I'm kind of afraid to tell you guys about this product because I know it's a good product, but I'm afraid, don't use those exact words, but whatever's coming out for you would be something to at least explore.
Because they know it anyway, right?
Yes.
We communicate emotion incredibly well, whether we want to or not.
Exactly.
And that was the problem that I had in sales, is I was going in saying, hey, let's do business together, yet terrified that they were actually going to say yes. Like, people pick up that stuff.
That's true.
Incredibly well built to be able to transfer that.
We do pick it up.
So somebody who is struggling and just is kind of resigned to that struggle, never going to see this interview, right? They're just not open to the message. But there are a lot of people, I think, who are proud of what they've done, are happy with what they've been able to accomplish, but want to do better and feel some frustration at why they can't do better. And how do I get better results? And why can't I just feel good about myself and not be attached to things and looking for other people to satisfy me and all these different issues that we can deal with? What would be your core message to those people?
I think the most important thing to do is have a big picture in mind. It's kind of like when you have a vision of what you want, then you're always moving towards that vision. So even if you fall, you know that vision's out there. So what happens with people is that they'll fail at something and go, oh, I failed at this. Why am I continuing this? It is your why in a sense. But they think that failure is going to define the rest of the path. And really that failure is just another learning point, another stepping stone to get to that vision. So I say, create a vision. And whether you want to create a vision board or whatever, I'm not sure if that's going to work for everyone. But, I thought about, what do I want in my life? What's going to continue keeping me driven and motivated even after I fail? So I did. I created a vision in my head of having a house on a lake. I'm like, I want a house on a lake. That's what I want. So no matter how many failures I hit along the way, and there's been a few, I remember I still want that house on the lake. So how badly do you want what you want? If you continue to focus on the month-to-month income, how many, like podcasters, how many downloads do I get? How many sales do I get on my ebook? If you continue to focus just on those things, then you kind of you're walking through mud. It gets slower, it gets sludgier, and you stop thinking about that vision. But when you always have the vision in mind, then ideas come out of the woodwork, and you start thinking, okay, I'm not making enough on this ebook, so now what do I need to do for this next stream of income, or whatever, however you define success. I talk about money because a lot of entrepreneurs talk about having more money. It's typically what it is. The more money we have, the more we sustain, the more we can leverage that money and then build momentum from there. So keeping that vision in mind, have a strong enough vision that propels you even after the failure. It's kind of like when I was married, no matter how bad my marriage got, I knew that after all the crap that we might go through, arguments or being poor, we were homeless for a while, even after all of that, I would still have my marriage. So I kept that vision in mind, even though I ended up losing my marriage. There's a whole nother story. But it did help. I mean, it definitely kept me going in that direction. So that would be my take on that.
Okay, so I'm going to come back again.
Let's do it.
So for me, one of my struggles was with even having things that I wanted, being able to have a vision, have things that I could say that I wanted, because I had kind of conditioned myself through disappointment to say, well, okay, wanting something is even too risky, so I'm just going to convince myself that there's nothing that I even want, which made that vision really difficult. Is there something before that?
Re-ask that question.
So what if if I am afraid to even want something for fear of being disappointed?
Okay. Got it. So there's another layer of something that's happening before you can even maybe create your vision.
Yeah.
So here's how you do it. Maybe, if I understand your question correctly. When I think of my vision, I think of the feeling I want to have. It's not so much that I want this lake on the house, even though I do. How will I feel having it? And I'm not saying embrace the feeling and use the law of attraction. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that when you have a vision of how you want to be in life, how you want to experience yourself, how you want to feel, what emotions you want to have, the vision helps me solidify how I want to feel. Yes. So when you think of something that may stop you, what'd you say? You said, resist wanting things. When you think, okay, why do you want to resist wanting things? I mean, what are you looking for? What are you looking to get out of that? Let me ask you, if we were to play this role out.
So ask it again.
So
what am I trying to protect myself from by
No. When you think of not, I don't know if this is real for you or not, but we're going to play it out anyway. When you think of...
we coach what we need to learn, right?
Right. When you think of not wanting things for some reason, why? Why don't you want things? What do you think it's going to do for you?
Yeah, well, so probably still solidifying this, but I think partly avoiding the disappointment of not getting something that, I'm not going to get what I want anyway, so why put myself through the disappointment of wanting it and then not getting it?
Right.
Some element probably of I don't deserve these things. I think, along the lines of those themes, I think.
Yeah, so I would sense some sort of self-esteem, self-worth issue there, for sure. And that tells me that, we need to go back and find out who convinced you that you weren't worth that.
Absolutely. And that's definitely the process that I've been going through.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about it's not necessarily about the thing, but it's about the feeling that you want from the thing.
Right.
And the other thought that I had related to that is that really then sets up also a way to look at where you are now compared to where you want to be.
Yep.
And can start to give you a little bit of a map for how to get there. It's one thing to just think, well, I'm unhappy. It's another thing to really think about, well, what would it be like to actually be happy?
Yeah. And some people, some people can't reach that. Some people don't know what happiness feels like.
Yeah.
So when I think of what you just described about not wanting it because maybe you don't feel like you're worth it, and I don't know if that's true or not, but because we're playing this out, I would go back even a further step and say, okay, so you don't feel like you're worth it, and what do you want then? You know what you don't want. So what do you want?
Yeah. Do
you want to feel worthy? Do you want to feel something else that you're not feeling? There's something obviously in lack there.
Yeah.
And
you're good at this. Michael was right to point me towards you. You are good at this.
Been doing it a while.
Yeah. But this is exactly the point, is that and this is where I was, that put me on this path, is that realization that there's something wrong here. I'm not looking at the world the way it really is. I think things are true about myself that just can't be true. They don't make sense based on what I know. So how do I sort this stuff out? And it was about that personal development piece and going back and figuring out where was I injured as a child and what did I learn from that and how am I manifesting that today? And all the things that we talked about, which was spectacular. I loved having you on the show. Is there anything you want to promote while we're here? Where can we point people?
I can't believe an hour has gone by.
I know.
I love talking about this stuff. If anyone wants to look for me, I am online. The fastest way is go to any search engine, type in The Overwhelmed Brain, and I take about the first 10 pages of search. But it's theoverwhelmedbrain.com. And once you get there, that's basically my home base. I have an ebook that I'd love for you to purchase, or at least consider purchasing. It's called Clear the Path to Happiness. And it's got a keyword loaded subtitle that I can't remember. But if you go to my website, you'll see how to get the book, and check out my podcast, The Overwhelmed Brain, on iTunes. It's highly ranked in self-help, and I hope you enjoy it. I always have a little music parody intro that I put in the beginning of every podcast, so that kind of like, what's going to happen next week? So kind of that hook to come back and listen again.
Yeah, the first time you tricked me, I was, this is how the original recording of the song was? I don't remember it that way.
Oh, good. Good trick.
I know, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Paul. Can you hang on for just a second while I sign off here?
Absolutely.
All right.
Great to be here.
Amazing interview. Coming into this, I never know what to expect, and I feel always that I get more than I could have wanted coming into it. And this, again, no change from that. And the thing that I really want you to take away is just the hope, the idea that there is an answer. If you feel like you've got something you're struggling with, just stay on the path, continue to move into it. We hear over and over again that it's about stepping into the fear, stepping into that pain, feeling the pain. Don't be afraid of the process. Huge payoff on the other side. Keep moving into it. So until we talk again, be the person you want to be, build the business you want to build, and have the successful life you want to have.